Definitions of true leadership are somewhat elusive, yet so numerous. Warren Bennis writes in his book on page 1, on becoming a leader, that leadership is like beauty. It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it. So with this in mind, we should start with a clear delineation that Robert Quinn identified. Leadership is not management or directing. Leadership is the ability to inspire or influence others towards the leader's goal. You choose to follow a person because they have a vision that you think is right. Simon Sinek's Golden Circle model pivots on the idea that successful leaders are able to make connections to the intrinsic nature of individuals' motivation to identify with those that follow. His model identifies that unless we're operating from the perspective of limbic brain, or that the individual self is working for the we, it is always a partial red brain response. Sinek conveys that employees follow those that lead not because we have to, but because we want to. Not for them, but for ourselves. It is those leaders who start with why who have the ability to inspire those around them. As stated previously, there are many models, but Lex Senesi, an organisational physicist and CEO of the world's largest affiliate marketing company, challenges Sinek's codified central aspect of why with his circle. It has who, which he feels identifies the true central aspect, an even more intrinsic nature of the follower's own motivations for connecting to the why. So, connection of the awareness of people you lead gives you the awareness of those around you. With this, it would acknowledge the role which the SCARF model plays in leading others. Knowing your situational preference as a leader within the SCARF model can help you. It can help you understand your own reactions to those around you. You can better regulate your emotions, better communicate your needs to others, and make choices more suited to your own preferences. The 4 Archetypes of Leadership by David Perkins is one key model which groups leadership styles into simple archetypes. Effective leaders are able to utilize these approaches masterfully. Each come with their own positives and negatives. Answer-centered leadership declares what has to be done and why. These leaders provide direction from the top of an organization. Some authors call this transactional leadership, and others call command and control leadership. Aligned here, I see a comparison with another model, the principle do right model. This is the model of advocate, the process of clarify the problem and take a position. Don't back down, be strong, be rational, be convincing, be right, is clearly one-sided. As with other perspectives, the winning all confrontations are a key aspect of this leadership model, and unfortunately not all situations have a win-win outcome in schools. Authoritative leadership is also very much connected with an answer-centered archetype. Unfortunately, the drawbacks to this archetype does nothing to promote the individual or collective growth of the participants, who become dependent on the leader. The leader can become trapped in a static role of providing answers, often the same answer time after time, eventually being placed in a position where they may not have an answer one day, and this undermines the archetype's safety domain for the followers. Vision-centered leadership, it offers a strong, energized vision about the general direction of an organization, along with great personal commitment. Other concepts in the literature in the neighborhood of vision-centered leadership include transformational leadership, visionary leadership, and charismatic leadership. In this archetype, the leaders offer a vision of the group's mission and ideals. Both displays and calls for a high commitment. It draws others into the vision and helps relate the vision to the immediate situations. Peter Senge emphasizes that many leaders have visions, but not so many effectively cultivate a shared vision. It is the shared vision that monopolizes and mobilizes people's minds and hearts. A challenge in this approach is the balance. Effective vision-centered leadership does not rely entirely on the vision. The leaders also make measured use of inquiry and answer and leave alone archetypes. The disadvantage of this style is perhaps the most disturbing of these. that takes the form of not an enlightened vision, but a blinding vision, in this case, of the charismatic religious cult leader. Inquiry-centred leadership fosters inquiry at various levels through questions, facilitation, and establishing community and organisational structures supportive of inquiry. This archetype can be connected to concepts in the literature in broadly the same spirit as facilitative, servant, and stewardship. One example of adaptive leadership, the kind of leadership needed when organisations face not just technical difficulties but fundamental challenges of culture and direction. A key component involved in inquiry-centred leadership is intrinsic motivation of the followers. An inquiry-centred leader would also encourage others' questions, challenging existing perspectives, facilitate conversations, initiate investigations, welcome multiple viewpoints, and alike. Inquiry-centred leaders not only let others do the thinking, but let them take credit for it also. An inquiry-centred leader attends to the contact architecture of an organisation, promoting a rich mixture of relationships, enriching the collaboration of inquiry models. One of the key components of success, though, is its leader's role to make certain decisions and issue certain kinds of commands and directives. The leader does so with an appropriate consultation, though. The issues associated with this archetype can be seen as under-facilitation for those who have a greater need for the answer-centred approach leader. Some followers can view this as like a false openness, an inquiry stance that simply disguises the leader's own answers waiting in the wing. It has a predisposed answer disguised in this farcical investigation, so authenticity is a key to successful inquiry-centred leadership. Leadership by leaving alone leaves people alone to find their way. This Darwinian approach reveals a personnel who have what it takes to survive and assume roles with increasing responsibility. The strength of this archetype comes from the capacity to set vision and providing the resources for those in control to take action. It provides for delegation of roles and provides room for leaders to act and exploring new directions and potentials. Leadership by leaving alone makes judicious use of answers, questions, and vision. The contrast with others lies in its central strategy, essentially a Darwinian strategy of establishing conditions for adaptation and selection. Unfortunately, this can also be seen as a sink or swim version in which people feel not only unsupported but unfairly treated, unclear about basic expectations, resentful when a leader takes them to task on grounds not previously aired, and distrust of a leader's motivation and commitments. Here we can also see risks of very low safety for collaboration, or rather, safety in numbers or the diminution of responsibility for work commitments. As previously stated, the 4 archetypes of Perkins are simplistic, yet provide an effective structure to work within. In Peter Senge's Give Me a Lever, he discusses the distributed leadership and team as an empowering the participation of expertise of stakeholders to create leadership practices and opportunities systemically. A greater shared effort and a collective vision of distributed successes. In a fully adaptive, successful organisation, leadership is expressed when an individual plays one or several roles that collectively ensure the effective functioning of an organisation. John Clippinger, a scholar of distributed leadership at Harvard Law School, proposes that these include, but are not limited to, the following archetype leadership roles: the exemplar, the gatekeeper, the visionary, the truth teller, the fixer, the connector, the enforcer, the facilitator. All have certain aspects which align with what we've already discussed. Yet, it is necessary that every individual within an organisation is to be encouraged to exercise leadership from time to time, under circumstances where their particular knowledge, skills, and circumstances make it advantageous to do so. Consequently, leadership development initiatives must encourage people to think in terms of alternating between leader and follower roles. We see this in an inquiry archetype. In my opening statement, I identified that it's hard to define leadership, but you know good leadership when you see and experience it. In Robert Quinn's Positive Strategic Leadership paper, it quoted, "A leader transcends his or her own ego moves outside the comfort zone to appreciate others' points of view and are open to learning from others who hold different conflicting perspectives. So, in summary, the focused leaders can command the full range of their attention. They are in touch with their inner feelings. They can control their impulses. They are aware of how others see them. They understand what others need of them, and they can weed out distractions and also allow their minds to roam freely, free of preconceptions. It's important, though, that you acknowledge that more information is not necessarily more benefit. The Focused Leader by Daniel Goleman, it had a quote from Nobel Prize-winning economist Herbert Simon. He wrote in 1971 that information consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. A focused leader has the capacity to direct this attention to what is important. So, a primary task of leadership is to direct attention. Daniel Goleman identifies 3 domains that we should be focusing on. We should start by focusing on ourselves, focusing on others, and the wider world. Warren Bennis writes on Becoming a Leader that the ingredients of leadership cannot be taught, they must be learnt. So, have we got what it takes? Well, Malcolm Gladwell says the 10,000-hour rule allows us to use deliberate practice to accomplish and master a skill. The best explanation of this is that it needs to be domain dependent. That domain dependency of a skill is probably the most biggest factor. If you don't get exposed to leadership opportunities, you can't practice. In Franz Johansson's book, The Click Moment, she argues that deliberate practice is really the only predecessor of success in fields that have super stable structures. For example, if you play tennis, you can get better at tennis, chess, music. The rules never change, or so you can study up and become the best. It is really an understanding of practice that can create better leaders.